Dawgs Central Live on Tuesday, June 21st. Hopefully, you're joining us on your drive home as it just hit 5 o'clock on the East Coast. I am Graham Coffey. This is John Smith. And John, you've been abroad for a couple of weeks, so it's good to have you back. We got a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, they let me back across the border. First, they let me cross the border into Canada, which was
that's an achievement.
I think it was, and then they let me back into the country. So yeah, we had a great week seeing all the sites in Western Canada, Banff and Jasper and Yoho National Parks. Highly recommend, folks, if you want to check out John Tweets Sports. My timeline has a bunch of pictures. It was a great week of vacation and had a great time keeping up with the Dawgs, this recruiting machine, while I was away. So it was a win-win.
Yeah, lots happening. Lots of good stuff on Dawgs Central, on the forums. Jason and Dustin have been really on top of some of this stuff and kind of, giving our subscribers a heads up before a lot of these things happen. Couple big commits in the last week. You had AJ Harris commit, I guess late last week. Defensive back prospect out of Phoenix City, Alabama, 5-star. Checks all those intangible boxes, and really exciting, I think, if you're a Georgia fan, to see Georgia go into Alabama, pull out a 5-star prospect that not only Alabama wanted, but that Florida, I think, felt confident they were going to land at a certain point in time. Kind of, what's your perspective on that on the heels of the national championship? Do you think it's just kind of a one-out off-lier, or is there a theme happening maybe?
Well, I think you got to look at there's a couple things, right? So it's off the heels of a national championship. It's off the heels of a draft in 2021 that saw Eric Stokes, go in the first round. It's off of a draft in 2022 that saw Lewis Seen. You got Will Muschamp now, as a co-defensive coordinator. You got Fran Brown coaching defensive backs, and Will Muschamp kind of coaching that safety position. So I think Georgia is an absolute magnet for defensive backs, has been for a while. But I do think the national championship has given a boost to Georgia in some places with players like AJ Harris, who may have been leaning somewhere else. Once you see that combination of national championship, draft, and then you also have the situation with Florida. Like I don't know, Billy Napier hasn't come out and just killed it in the recruiting aspect from day one, and so players want to play with other elite players, right? Like, we know this. When you're an elite player, you're a competitor. You want to be with a group of elite players, and I think Billy Napier is going to have to keep building for Florida to kind of get there, right? So I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. I do think Georgia going into Phoenix City and Alabama there and getting AJ Harris is big. It's always big when you get one of the best players from Alabama to come across the line, and I'm excited. I'm excited for the secondary for a lot of reasons. But I think AJ Harris is another one that, is just kind of like one that honestly kind of snuck in there too, right? I mean, he was almost a surprise visitor a couple of weeks ago with his official visit. There wasn't a lot of press about it, and then we kind of heard about it, and Jason kind of posted about, hey, heads up, there's a guy visiting. It's not on the list, right? So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you're talking about sort of the ideal body type for an SEC corner, right? 6'1", 180 pounds, really explosive lower half, good quick twitch ability, type of guy that I think wants to play defensive back. I think he wants to be a boundary corner, but possesses the skills to be, really great in that kind of star position for Georgia or as a safety. Where I'm kind of most impressed with him, just looking at his tape, is his ability to come downhill and run support and really wallop. I think is something that just fits well with kind of the Georgia defense ethos and what we saw out of Ringo last year, what we saw out of Darion Kendrick, who was a guy that everyone said couldn't tackle, and then he showed up in Athens and all of a sudden He was really, really strong in run support and was just very willing to stick his head into some messy situations and make an impact. So I think he sort of possesses that mentality already that Georgia likes to instill in their secondary players. Going to be interesting because you've got Tony Mitchell returning to campus this weekend. There's 3 5-star defensive backs in Alabama this cycle, and you've got one committed. You've got another coming on campus this weekend. You'll get a chance with them. I think right now Mitchell is a pretty solid A&M lean, but you never know. You get a guy on campus and you see what happens. So great job by Georgia's staff there. I think they've been putting up a fence around Georgia for a year now, but starting to kind of creep over the line there and due to Alabama and Auburn, what those programs have done to Georgia for a very long time. So
AJ Harris is a guy that you would, 5 years ago, you'd have said, hey, he's probably going to go to Auburn, right? Like Phoenix City right there in that area. But obviously you mentioned it at the top, but national championship, the results in the draft, I love the extension over that Alabama line personally. That's a good one to always get.
Absolutely. And then last night, interestingly enough, I got a little tip on this. I'm on the phone with Jason, who's one of our recruiting experts at Dawgs Central. We're talking about putting a post on the forum, and as soon as we get off the phone, boom, it happens. CJ Allen commits to Georgia, linebacker. Really talented kid, 6'1", 217. But I think what's interesting here is just, he's an in-state guy for Georgia down in Barnesville. But I've been told by some folks that follow recruiting even closer than I do that of all the inside linebackers in this class, like this might be the one to be most excited about. Third ranked backer in the state of Georgia, third ranked player in the state of Georgia. But really, really a lot of ability to grow into being another one of these freakish, Glenn Schumann kind of creations that goes on and does big things in the SEC and has a chance to have a good future in the NFL. But it's interesting to see those inside linebacker dominoes start to fall because I think Georgia is in on 4 or 5 guys there, but maybe only has 2 to 3 slots. So it seems like a guy that went ahead and said, this is where I want to be. I want to make sure that, I'm there. So curious to see if some more dominoes start falling behind that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. CJ Allen, I would encourage folks to go. You can find it on Twitter. You can find it on Dawgs Central if you're a subscriber in one of the threads. But the picture of him in the all whites of his official visit, you can see the physicality of the body style of this guy. It really, it definitely is in the mold. Yeah, it's definitely
that was AJ Harris. Sorry.
Okay, got it. But you can see him definitely in the mold of a Nakobe Dean. A little obviously, I think he's a little bit shorter than a Roquan Smith, but you can see like that bulk on him. He's also a multi-sport athlete, basketball guy, track guy. He's a kid that, I think when you look at the prototypical linebacker, he's one. He runs a 4.6-ish 40, I think. Runs, a low 11 in the 100-meter. Like I think he's a guy that can move and has some size on him. So I love watching, I love seeing these guys having fun in these, photo shoots and these edits and, all these things. But like when you see the bulk, like some of these kids, you can see right away, you're like, oh, dang. And that kid's going to have another, year in the weight room or semester in the weight room before he comes to Georgia and then gets in the Georgia weight room. You can see that trajectory of just the opportunity for them to just really grow into that prototypical inside linebacker.
Yeah, 100%. And these white jerseys have gotten the recruits that, like, I know that everyone's trying to say they're not going to wear them, but if they are that attractive to elite blue chip 5-star prospects, then at some point you may have to wear them. But I did find that photo. Here you go, right here in the middle of your screen.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. Yeah, this kid still has another season of high school football. Yeah. When you think about linebackers, you're like, yeah, that's definitely you think about giving that guy an offseason with Scott Sinclair as well, and you're like, holy cow. It's gonna be good for Georgia.
100%. Yeah. And kind of talking about recruiting and looking at what we think is coming down the pipe. Jamal Jarrett cut his list, left his official visit at Georgia, and shortly thereafter stopped taking official visits, canceled a trip to Texas A&M. So he's down to Georgia, North Carolina, Alabama. He's a guy that has been really interesting. He's not been a camp kid throughout his career, but he is, he's 6'6", 350, and he moves a lot like a Jordan Davis did, really. And we actually had the opportunity. I got to interview him recently, and we had him, chatting. And I've chatted with him a few times off the record, but really a thoughtful guy, and I think who is kind of very torn between his home state school and UNC and Georgia. But this picture here of him and Jordan Davis, I just thought it was very clever of UGA to bring Jordan Davis in, another defensive tackle from the state of North Carolina. And, Davis said to Jarrett straight up, hey, like, this program has made me what I am today. So very interested to see where he goes. I know that our guys on the site feel pretty strongly that he's a Georgia lean, as do I, but there's still a month left in that recruitment, and we'll see what happens. But when you start looking at the potential of maybe a Tyler Williams with a Sadir Mitchell, a Jamal Jarrett with a Sadir Mitchell in the month of July, you're talking about another one of those like scary D tackle duos for Georgia. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, because it's kind of like you were talking about earlier. It seems like a lot of the success of this past defense is sort of perpetuating into this recruiting class, and it's very easy to sell a vision when that vision has already happened with other players, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what Kirby has built. And I think, I don't want to be cliche or kind of say the obvious, but the machine, the pipeline, when you look at the trajectory over the last few years of both the games that Georgia has been in, the stages they've been on, and the folks that the players that Georgia has put into the draft, right? I mean, Kirby was already recruiting at a high level before those things started happening. But you throw in a national championship, you throw in 15 players drafted, you throw in 5 defensive players in the first round. I mean, it's certainly the most compelling, I think, recruiting pitch in our lifetime for sure. And I would say that even if you take out the national championship, if you just take out the earnings of Georgia players in the NFL, but you throw in that natty, and I think the sky's the limit for Georgia with this class.
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of that sky, we can't have a show without Arch Manning. So Arch Manning came to Georgia. We talked about that, I believe. Or maybe we haven't talked about it. You were gone a couple weeks. But anyways, had a great visit on campus in Athens. From all accounts, talking to folks who were there and would know, it seems like it couldn't have gone any better. But just left Athens, went to Alabama for a visit to Tuscaloosa, goes to Austin for a visit to Texas, and while he's there with Will Randall, who is his favorite target. Is also, he's a young tight end who commits to Texas, and all of a sudden things start buzzing a little bit, right? So how should we feel about the Arch Manning saga here on June 21st?
Man, so Arch Manning, let's be clear. Arch Manning's recruitment is nothing like a lot of these high-profile players' recruitment these days, right? Arch Manning's recruitment feels very much like an old school relationship-based college experience
Mhm.
recruitment. And the way that I feel about it is I feel that Georgia is in the lead. I will say this because this is, this is who I am and how I feel. When you look
Uh-huh.
at the pictures of Arch Manning at Alabama, the kid, like, I don't know if he smiled the entire time. I I saw these photos and I was like, it's like hostage photos.
Blink twice
So
if you're
exactly, you
being
were
held
like,
against your will.
but also he was there. A lot of the players he was there with, he didn't have any real connection with. The
Mhm.
recruiting visits that he went on at Georgia and at Texas, he had very deep connections with the players he was with, which I think is really important. So Will Randall, you mentioned Pierce Spurlin when he came to Georgia. Both guys that he that he is friends with, that he has personal relationships with. I also think the relationship with the coaching staff is deeper at Georgia and Texas than Alabama. So the way I think about it is I do think it's a battle between Georgia and Texas.
Agreed.
Personally, Arch Manning he said in an interview that I read a couple months ago, he said, Sarkisian, it was his first year. We're going to see kind of what he does in his second year at Texas. I don't think Texas is going to do anything to impress Arch Manning. I just don't. I don't. What's interesting is,
Really?
like, and
Okay.
here's what I would love to hear your thoughts on. So
Sure.
Say Texas comes out and Quinn Ewers plays lights out as a starting quarterback and Texas wins 10 games. Do you think that helps or hurts Texas
Well, I think
recruiting
that's the
chances,
problem.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, because if
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers is able to sort of establish himself, then he has another year. We know for a fact that when Georgia was pursuing Caleb Williams in the transfer portal, that was something that turned Manning off a little bit. So when you look at that, I think it is fair to ask that question because if Caleb Williams had come to Athens, he would basically have had a 1 year overlap with Arch Manning as well. So I don't see how a scenario is there where it's like, well, I'm not okay with having a 1 year overlap here, but I am okay with having a 1 year overlap with this other 5-star prospect that was number one in his class. So fair question to ask. I think so. What's interesting, right, is you get Will Randall committing to Texas, and there started to be some rumors from the Texas side of covering this recruitment of, hey, he's going to commit next week after the Manning Passing Academy, right? And he's going to commit to Texas, which if you nobody knows this, okay? I mean, at least I don't believe anybody knows this, but couple things to think about there. One, if you're a 5-star quarterback recruit and you're going to commit this summer and you're going to choose between Georgia and Texas, I think it'd be very hard to choose Texas in that scenario because I think you would need to sit down and see some things that you haven't seen from that regime at Texas yet that Georgia has done, right? So, I mean, like, if the kid's going to make a decision in June, then or July or August, like, I think that's a plus for UGA because I feel like unless he's just so sold on going to Texas and the life experience there, I don't see just knowing what we know. I feel like that leans heavily towards UGA.
I agree.
But Will Randall may be one of his very good friends and his favorite target on his current team. But one thing that I have been tweeting since like a year ago, maybe now, is that a lot of people in the media and a lot of people following this recruitment have kind of missed or aren't aware of how tight the relationship is between Arch Manning and Pierce Spurlin. And those families are very tight. It's not just a relationship between the youngsters there. So I don't know. I don't think, regardless of Spurlin or Randall, like that's not what this kid's making this decision on. Like
Yeah.
he is a multi, if not million, possibly $1 billion brand when you extrapolate out a 4-year college career or a 3-year college
I
career and 12 to 15
yeah
in the NFL. He's not
yeah
making that decision based on where a
yeah.
17-year-old buddy's going.
No, his family is so perspective. His family is worth over $500 million, right? Like, I mean, these I
They've
don't
done
think I
okay.
don't yeah, I don't think even, I don't think I truly think that it's a throwback recruitment. I think Arch Manning is certainly looking for a college experience for 3 to 4 years. And I think that's very high on his list. I also think, you look at his dad, right? His dad, Cooper, who, for all intents and purposes, people have said that Cooper was the best athlete of the Manning brothers, which is, Peyton and
He's
Eli and
also the
Cooper.
most fun as
He
well.
he is pretty fun. But people have said, he was the most athletic. He was like on this trajectory, and he had an injury, and that ended
Right.
his athletic career. And I think that plays a big part into him as a father with how he looks at Arch Manning and his college experience, right? Because we know the NFL is not guaranteed.
Right.
It's not a guarantee that you won't have an injury, knock on wood, that ends your athletic career. His dad went through that as a high profile, high caliber, very gifted athlete. And so I think, it is very different. I don't think that there's, NIL. Like, if people look at Texas and the money of Texas, I don't think any of that stuff matters. Wherever Arch
No.
Manning goes, he's gonna have national NIL deals. Um,
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. So, but I think at the end of the day, that's another aspect that I think people have overlooked, is that the situation that his dad went through of not being able to be that, elite college athlete because of an injury, and having to pivot. I think that plays a big part in how the family thinks about this.
No, I agree. And I think that like you said earlier, it's like this is not a traditional college recruitment, at least for this day and age. It's traditional when you
Yeah.
talk about what a elite quarterbacks recruitment looked like in the mid 90s. But at the end of the day, I don't think NIL or any of that stuff is going to be the determining factor here, because let's be honest, like those opportunities are going to be there for him no matter where he goes, because he's a national brand. His last name is a national brand. God, who knows? I mean, in 2 years we may have Peyton and Eli doing a Manning cast on the Manning Plus network of Arch's college games, and someone will pay $2.99 for that or more, right? I mean, shit, I'd probably watch it, be interested. So yeah, long story short, I don't think anyone really knows anything. But if by some off chance he were to kind of speed up that timeline, then I think that favors Georgia.
I agree.
That's kind of the big takeaway here. Like,
Yeah.
no visit ever really goes poorly. So, of course, Texas feels good about where they are coming off that visit. But Georgia has been the leader here, regardless of what your favorite national reporter wants to tell you. Georgia has been the leader here going back to last summer.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have a hard time computing that because there's narratives around Kirby Smart and quarterbacks, but it's not really about the fan narrative, is it? So,
Anything can happen in recruiting. From everything I've heard, I would be shocked if Arch Manning doesn't end up at Georgia. The other thing I'll throw in there too is, as you mentioned, kind of like, I think anything can happen in recruiting. Arch Manning, that his high school coach has kind of acted as their spokesperson. He said that they'll make a decision, like he'll make an announcement, he'll make a decision when he feels like he's made a decision. So I think that, to your point, if he makes it earlier, I think that favors Georgia. I would personally love for him to make it earlier because I think he's going to bring a lot of talent with him when he makes a decision. But it could be we could be here, in November, waiting on Arch Manning to tell us.
We could be here in February, yeah.
In
but
February, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I don't think that we're gonna get like a whole thing of like, hey,
yeah.
I've cut my thing to, like I could see him just like dropping a graphic on Twitter one day and be like, I'm committed to this school, and never doing a big ceremony in the high school gym or anything like that, and just like going and playing his senior year of high school football and moving along. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles it, because I think he's kind of like almost relishing sort of the just like his own ability to kind of shun the spotlight. I mean, he follows nobody on Twitter. His bio says he's a high school student. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, dude. Like, I get it, but when you get to wherever you're going and you go downtown or you go to that frat party or wherever, like, you're not going to be a normal student, but that's okay.
You can say what you want, but he was in the all whites. And he was in the photo shoots, like he
wasn't all whites.
He could say the I'm a high school student. I don't follow anybody. You could tell he got in that college scenery and he was feeling it. Do you have
having a good time?
Real quick? Fred asked in the chat, do we have any update on Quay Russell and James Smith?
Russo, I think everyone's feeling good about. I think, that would include myself, Jason, Dustin. I would expect Russo to be a UGA commit. I don't have a good timeline for when that will happen, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it happens this summer. James Smith, I think, is a massive battle with Alabama, and I think it's going to – I don't know how long that's going to go. It would not shock me if that goes all the way to December, but they're definitely – I would call them a solid leader for Russo, and I would call Smith a coin flip at this point.
Yeah.
One other thing I did want to bring up with the Arch Manning thing was just we would be remiss not to at least like touch on Rueben Owens, number one running back in the country or number two running back in the country, depending on who you subscribe to. Just dropping out of thin air that he's going to Louisville yesterday, because there was a strong desire there, I think, at one point for him to play with Arch Manning and vice versa. I know that, Manning was trying to pull him in certain directions at one point. And I don't think for whatever reason, the relationships really panned out between Owens and UGA. And UGA's in on some great backs. They're in on Richard Young. They're in on Haynes. But it is very interesting just to kind of see him go to Louisville, because there was some thought at one point that Owens and Manning, if Owens signed with Texas, I think that would have been a little bit of a check in their column in terms of, hey, maybe this is stacking up with the guys that Arch does want to play with, right?
Do we want to talk about Louisville's recruitment process?
Of course. Yeah, we don't work for So we say what we want here.
Yeah, so for those who missed it, Louisville, they had a dinner for recruits in an airplane hangar.
Lear jets and Corvettes, baby.
Literally Lear jets, private jets, and muscle cars, right? Like Hellcats and the whole thing. So it's interesting to see how folks are adapting with recruiting. Rueben Owens, it's definitely, to me, it feels definitely like an NIL situation. I don't project on why people make decisions, but Louisville has definitely went outside the box with the airplane hangar and the private jets and the muscle cars. That was pretty wild to see. Yeah.
No, good for him, right? Like, get your
Yeah.
bag. I'm all for
Oh,
it.
agree. Oh, totally.
Congratulations.
Same. Yeah.
If you are in in a situation where you have the opportunity to possibly change your family's, lot in life,
100%.
and you can
100%.
do it as a 17-year-old, and congrats, that's great. I do think that, if you look at Georgia's recruitments right now, I'm sure there's some NIL involved, but it's much more. I think what Georgia's selling is much more. We'll get you the big bag in 3 to 4 years when you go to the NFL draft. But the Owens thing, I think, is very interesting because just since NIL kind of came into existence, we saw Travis Hunter go to Jackson State. Now we see Owens going to Louisville. There was a little bit of an idea, I think, around NIL that it would be like the rich get richer, but in a lot of ways, I think we're seeing some parity and some really interesting commitments come out of it. And I'm kind of enjoying the twist a little bit just because it's fun. Like, what is Rueben Owens going to do at Louisville? You know what I mean? It's like, is he going to be a beast? Is it going to go poorly and maybe ends up transferring somewhere else? I don't know, but I do think it's good for the sport. I think having more people excited about their teams is great. As I've said all along, going back to Tennessee signing Nico for whatever it was,
$8 million.
$8 million. Yeah, $8 million. $2 million.
Allegedly.
Wake me up when they start signing 5-star defensive tackles and defensive ends and offensive linemen, because I think that's still where the game is won. But
so what we're seeing, right, with NIL is that the flashy thing and I don't want to say easy because recruiting is very, very hard, but the easy thing to do is throw NIL money dollars at skill players, right? I mean, those are the ones, the people who touch the ball are the ones that it is. Yeah, that's what, if I owned a car dealership, I would want the guy who's touching the ball every play to be on the billboards for my car dealership. I wouldn't think about, let me get a left tackle on my billboard, right? Because the way sports broadcasting works, they don't talk a lot about left tackles or right guards or whatever. But you've said this before, you've tweeted this before, and I know the reason that Georgia has been successful, the reason that Alabama has been successful, when Clemson was successful and beating Alabama in the college football playoff, it was the line of scrimmage. Like Clemson's defensive line, their offensive line, Georgia, the offensive line depth that Kirby Smart has built, the ability in the national championship game to switch out a left tackle and move the line down. That's how you win big-time football games. It's how you've always won them. It's how you always will win them, because skill players, we saw what happened with Ohio State and Michigan. I think that's a great example from last year when Ohio State went to Ann Arbor. Michigan's offensive line bullied Ohio State up and down the field, right? And they just ran
their
the
defensive
ball,
line too, yeah.
And their defensive line, their defensive line, Aiden Hutchinson and Jabo and those guys, like, just brutalized Ohio State. And so you can have all the skill players you want, but the game is won at the line of scrimmage. And so I do think it's going to be interesting 2 years from now, when a lot of NIL money has been thrown at skill players, to see the results of, like, Tennessee, for example, where Josh Heupel, everywhere he's been, he's shown no inclination to actually build in the trenches, right? And so you score, 40 points a game, but you get beat 45-42 because you can't stop the other team. And that's what we saw with Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma. And I think that's the challenge with those guys who have trouble recruiting in the trenches. And what's happened is that you have teams that are far ahead, Georgia and Alabama being the two best examples, I think, but you also have other teams as well that are far ahead in their recruitment pipeline of offensive and defensive tackles. They're putting guys in the NFL. It's going to be hard to keep up with those recruiting machines at on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's going to be the separation, right? But there are weird things that happen in football games, and I think we would all agree that some of these spread offenses and hurry up attacks and stuff like that, like they equalize that disadvantage, that kind of talent discrepancy on the line of scrimmage in a lot of cases, because most schools don't have three rotations full of 4- and 5-star defensive linemen to just throw out there. And in a lot of cases, it's like, if you're a school like Louisville and you can wear out kind of that first team defense by getting 85 plays off in a game, then you start finding yourself in a situation where maybe you are popping some runs and you're able to do some things. So I think what I'm really fascinated to see is whatever happens with the college football playoff. We all know I'm against expanding it and turning it into like, I'm against marginalizing the regular season, I guess is what I should say. But
another show for another day.
Yeah. But I guess the intersection of college football playoff expansion and NIL, I think, could be very fascinating, because there's going to be a year where somebody, sneaks in there that no one expects, and then that puts their name on the lips of some recruits, and some donors come in and want to support that, and all of a sudden you may see like a snowball effect and a program turn into a competitor sort of in a microwave small
it's
couple year window.
Yeah, I do think NIL can accelerate the parity, right? So you can quickly, we know. So I come from the business world. I come from the world of marketing in my previous professional life. And what about marketers is they want the biggest stages, right? If you have players, if you can somehow find your way to a college football playoff or a New Year's Six bowl, and you can put those players front and center, then I think that is where you can accelerate those dollars coming into the program, which can accelerate the parity now with the way that things currently stand of getting players on your team. But we also know, and I know in the next few weeks we'll start getting into more X's and O's, talking about Georgia, Oregon, previewing the season. But we also know that it's not parity has to start. Football is such a great sport because parity has to be at almost every position. You can have, the best skill players. If your offensive line is not good, it doesn't matter. You can have, a good offensive line. If your skill players can't beat the athletes on the defense, then it doesn't matter. You certainly have to build that. But I love your point about trying to see what just what can happen if you have a couple of teams that stumble their way in. What I hope happens, I love seeing Georgia, Alabama play. I'm a Georgia fan. I love seeing that matchup.
You're a glutton for punishment, huh?
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Kidding.
I've seen them all. Sat in the rain and watched us get blown out in 2015. All of it. Went to Indy, saw the national championship, rejoiced. What I will
there
say,
in 08.
Yeah. What I will say is, as a Georgia fan, I do kind of, I enjoyed the early college football playoffs when you had Michigan State sneaking in there or Washington sneaking in there.
Yeah.
They got blown out, right? Like they got the break speed off of them. But so did Michigan and Cincinnati this year. And so I'm the kind of guy where I was excited to see Cincinnati like come in. Like I knew it was going to be tough for them to be competitive, but I'm interested to see if you can get some of those dynamics of teams.
Cincinnati was more competitive with Alabama than Michigan was with Georgia, right?
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I like seeing teams sneak in and seeing what that could do from like just building momentum or a flywheel for some of these programs now that you have NIL. Because for me, I don't want to diminish the regular season. I think what hopefully happens is that the regular season ends up becoming more meaningful, where you have like Georgia starting with Oregon this year is a great example, Georgia Clemson last year, but where you have these marquee matchups, and the marquee matchups happen because of the teams. The playoffs have started to get a little bit more diverse in terms of team makeup, right? I think Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, like it's great to see, but I would love, and we have this on the schedule, we'll see if it holds, but I would love to see Georgia and Ohio State in September, and then let's see what happens, with the playoff picture from there.
3 months later, or perhaps they rematch down the road, or for sure. So you had mentioned a moment ago that you have a lot of your background is in marketing. So before we sign off here, this is obviously Dawgs Central Live. For those of you that don't know, John and I are part of and co-partners on a new venture called DawgsCentral.com. If you haven't, go and check it out. Our forums are awesome. There's a ton of really, I think, like hard-hitting meat and potatoes intel that we're giving our subscribers before anyone else is putting it out there in a lot of cases. But there's some free stuff like a great Jamal Jarrett interview and some cool stats from Josh Hancher and all sorts of fun stuff, blogs from Jim Wood. So go check that out. If you haven't at least been to the site, please go check it out. But if you have not subscribed yet, we're going to give you an opportunity to peek behind the curtain. John, tell them what's happening.
Yeah, so if you go to dawgscentral.com/register, dawgscentral.com/register, and create an account, you don't have to buy a subscription. Just create your account. Next week, we're going to give a free week to everyone who has an account created on dawgscentral.com. So what that means is starting later this week, we're going to unlock the entire site, unlock the forums. And so go to dawgscentral.com/register, create a free account. And then on Friday of this week, we're going to unlock all of the content and give you an opportunity to preview it. Take it for a ride, see what you like, and give us an opportunity to consider subscribing. We're just getting started. Dawgs Central has been a site now, believe it or not, for just 21 days, Graham. So just 3 weeks.
Is that it? Wow.
Yeah, and we're going to be pushing a bunch of content, both with shows, with the intel that Graham mentioned, but also just starting, fun community things, breaking down X's and O's, all of those things leading up to the season. So this is it's a fun time for recruiting. If you're into that, there's tons of that. It's going to be a really fun time for a lot of the other things that go into the game of football over the next few weeks. So we'll give you a free week. Just go to dawgscentral.com/register, sign up for a free account. We'll throw a free weekend. You can check it out. And if you like it, we'd love you to consider subscribing.
Awesome. Well said. That's all we've got for today, but we're going to be back later this week with some other stuff. If you are a subscriber, we are going to be doing a live answering session to the Ask Dawgs Central topic on our forum. A lot of you guys had some really great, guys and girls, had some really fantastic questions for us last week, and it was a lot of fun. So we're going to put that thread up here this afternoon, and we'd love for you to start throwing some questions our way. And last but not least, please go check him out at John Tweet Sports on Twitter. Please come find me at Dog Out West on Twitter. And probably most importantly, please go follow at Dawgs Central on Twitter. That is Dawgs Central with an underscore at the end. We are working on getting the one without the underscore. Stay tuned for that. I am Graham Coffey. This is John Smith. John, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, guys. Have a great week. See ya.